Now let's get two things straight. First, this game is another example of why PC gaming is a gamble and may be on the downfall, because every reviewer who got an early copy of this game was only given the PC version, and all these reviewers have talked about various bugs and glitches, some of which are as crazy as losing your audio and your subtitles, and even massive performance bugs, things that I have not seen on that scale on the PS5 version. They even prevented the reviewers from sharing any footage of gameplay from Chapter 3 and beyond, something that every reviewer I watched had stated that these bizarre bugs and glitches occurred from Chapter 3 and beyond, essentially pulling a CD Projekt Red with Cyberpunk, only allowing reviewers to show certain content that would try to paint this picture of a flawless game that clearly does not exist here. Secondly, anyone who tells you that this game is not a Souls-like and is more similar to something like God of War, whether you hear it from your favorite review channel or you hear it from the developers themselves, be aware that they are completely lying to you. The one thing I could find in this game that closely resembles a God of War is the crafting system for your armor, and even that is a little bit of a stretch. Everything else in this game, for the most part, is exactly like a Souls-like, just not as hard as a Souls game, so half a Souls game, if you will. If the reviewers were honest from the start and possibly not lying due to a review embargo, I am assuming, if they had said from the beginning, hey, this is actually a Souls-like, I never would have bought the game, period. I hate Souls games. I hate the get good mindset. Yes, I do like a challenge, but games that are as challenging as a Souls-like, to me, is psychological torture, and I feel uninviting to a gamer who just wants something a bit less frustrating. Now, with that being said, let's dive into Backtrack Wukong. Sorry, I mean Bullshit Wukong. Sorry, I mean Black Myth Wukong.
Unfit as I deemed.
As I mentioned, they lied about this game not being a Souls-like, and you're going to backtrack in this game quite often. There is so much backtracking to grind for experience, to beat the next challenging boss only to win, lose constantly to the next boss after that one, backtrack some more to gain more experience and level up, and rinse and repeat over and over and over and over again. So let's talk about combat, one of, if not the main aspect of this game. Now, as a Souls-like, because as we already established, this is a Souls-like, and to a point, even like an action RPG, you do have various abilities that are tied to various button commands that are displayed on screen. And just like a Souls-like, you will not only face challenging bosses, but also challenging enemies who at times can come off as challenging as the bosses. That's not the case for every enemy you meet, but there are some that are really, really brutally challenging. And like a Souls game, you will use your stamina bar for pretty much everything: running, jumping, dodging, attacking, things that God of War does without needing to use a stamina bar. You see the comparisons to a Souls game more and less to God of War, don't you? Now, like a Souls game, you will also find various shrines, which is what this game uses besides a campfire. And you will use the shrines to rest and improve your stats and craft new armor and weapons and basically brew some potions or items, if you will. And resting at these places will also respawn the enemies that you defeated in the area, like a Souls-like. And granted, this game did decide to not use a parry system like the Souls game. Instead, it uses a dodge mechanic as its primary mode of defense. And the one thing that I do feel is similar here is that Souls game will give you a damage increase as a bonus for a perfect parry, whereas this game will reward you with a bit of a slowdown after a perfect dodge. So you kind of see a bit of a comparison there as well. I'm assuming that the developers chose dodging rather than parrying as a method to not be classified as a Souls game. Now, you do have 3 meters on screen to keep your eye on, health, stamina, and mana. Now, as I mentioned earlier, stamina covers basically all of your movements from running, jumping, dodging, combat, etc. Mana, however, is used for your various abilities that you unlock, kind of similar to a Souls game with their magic meter for your spells. Again, more similarities, right? So in Wukong, however, your mana is used for different abilities that you unlock for combat that have its own different variety and uses. Some are examples like Immobilize to freeze your enemy in place and do damage while they are frozen. You have the ability to transform into some bosses whose souls you can obtain after defeating them in combat. More on that in a bit. You also have options to disappear and leave a clone behind, and you can strike your enemy from behind. You can turn to stone to deflect attacks. You can summon some clones to fight alongside you, and some others that I won't spoil here. Now, unfortunately, though, as far as I can see with the game and how far I've gotten, you only have your staff as your only weapon to attack. You can unlock new, stronger staffs, of course, and there are, of course, various abilities that you unlock during the different stances that you can upgrade for the staff. But no other weapons, no swords, no axes, no range weapons for those annoying-ass archers. Sure, you can spin your staff to deflect the arrows, but you would also need an upgrade for you to be able to walk forward while staff spinning to deflect those arrows. I mean, really? What? Now, as for the stances that I mentioned earlier, there's 3 that you can unlock abilities for. There's Smash, which would do primary, heavy damage, and you can use while you're on foot. Pillar Stance will allow you to sit on top of the staff as it extends while you charge up your focus meter, kind of similar to Goku's Power Pole from DBZ, as the staff will extend a bit more throughout various levels, which will then lead to a much stronger heavy attack when you let go of the triangle button. And then you finally have the Thrust Stance, which is meant for a long, straightforward attack and then do some kind of retreat to get some distance between you and your enemy. Now, with these stances, along with the typical light combo that you can perform, these stances also have the option to perform a heavy attack during a light combo that will not only allow you to do these heavy attacks much quicker than just pressing the heavy button on its own, but if you have more focus points available, your heavy attack will do even more damage depending on how many focus points you have saved up. Now, combat also has some of its issues that fans of these previous mentioned Souls games might say isn't an issue, but instead a feature. Let me explain. For example, you can't cancel your combo to do a dodge to avoid damage if you're a button masher. This game is all about timing and hitboxes, except the timing is ass and the hitboxes can be complete bullshit. There's enemies and bosses who will hit you despite not being anywhere near you, and that includes when you dodge out of the way and you still get hit for some bullshit hitbox reason. There's bosses where you would hit them and you're visibly making contact, but the game won't register that you are actually hitting them and they won't lose any health. I also had a boss fight that managed to jump behind an invisible wall, and I could not do anything to him until he jumped back into the arena. If you play this game, you probably know which one I'm talking about, and if you don't, it's the one really, really annoying boss from Chapter 2, which honestly that could mean a couple of bosses, but the final boss in Chapter 2 is basically what I'm talking about. Now, one thing that this game is missing that is similar to a Souls-like is a character creator. However, you still have a silent protagonist like a Souls game, whereas in God of War, you do have an actual protagonist with an interesting backstory and lore with actual personality and dialogue. Okay, no more comparing this to Souls and God of War, at least for now. Now, for this game, you do play as what I believe is either a descendant of Sun Wukong or maybe a reincarnation of Sun Wukong. I don't know. The game hasn't really been clear on that. Of course, you can research Journey to the West, a story that this game is basically based on. But why didn't the developers include more detail to help those unfamiliar with the story? There's no lore that you can find, no documents to read, no real context of the story. And if you're someone, like I said, who is unfamiliar with Journey to the West, you're going to be completely lost throughout this game. And I'm pretty sure, with my assumption, a lot of us in the States are going to be completely lost because a lot of us are probably not familiar with Journey to the West. So ultimately, I do not know what my ultimate goal is in this game exactly. Am I Sun Wukong? Am I a descendant, a reincarnation? Am I trying to reclaim what he lost? Am I trying to kill all the gods in this pantheon? Or what the hell am I doing? I have no idea. So it's pretty clear that I was very disappointed when I learned the truth about this game and its difficulty, especially after how excited I was from the game's opening battle. Now, I will give the devs a pass on any minor performance issues I faced on the PS5, as they were not game breaking like they were on the PC reviews that I've seen. The PS5 version can run at a full 60 frames per second, whereas the PC version, from what I hear, it's more common for it to run in 30 frames, struggling to reach that 60 frames per second. Plus, the PC port has some really crazy PC specs requirements, so keep that in mind. And, it is a small developer team, so some hiccups are excused. But what's not excused is the lack of a map. Although people say this game is very linear and you're going to go straight for most of it, that's not really true. There are large areas to explore throughout the games, especially as you go into chapter 2, 3, and beyond. These chapters do open up more and more with tons of side bosses, side content, various secrets to find, etc. So a map is very heavily needed in this game. They actually took the time to add a pretty decent photo mode, something that I am grateful for, as I love photo mode when they are good. I take a lot of photos in video games when they have a good photo mode, but no map? Come on, guys. Now, I like to be honest and fair in my reviews, something that most channels aren't, IGN. And above all of this, and mind you, this is my opinion, so keep that in mind. What are the positives to this game that I found? Well, pretty much every reviewer that I watched said that the game contains bland, boring areas in between the various bosses, and it's basically a glorified boss rush. But I disagree. Number one, the areas in between the bosses are actually interesting to me and very, very nice to look at. Visually stunning. Whether it's an expanded forest you're going through or mountains covered in snow, the game looks really great. Sound design is also amazing with the music and sounds of combat and enemies. They definitely got those two things right. Now, although these areas in between bosses contain often repetitive enemies and some with the most insane difficulty spikes, the areas do contain, as mentioned, various secrets and treasures to find that will slightly help you on your journey forward. Some things such as various wills, which is kind of like your currency to buy things in the game. You can find upgrades that will improve your health and stamina and mana. You can find some new recipes for different items that will help you out in battle, whether it's a damage boost or a damage receive reduction, that kind of thing. So there are really good things to find in the game in these open areas, and I do believe the open areas are really nice and really beautiful to look at. But with the whole boss rush thing, yeah, there are quite a large number of bosses, but I wouldn't say this is really a boss rush mode, as it's not really that often that you will have to fight boss after boss after boss. There are some moments where you might fight a boss or two one after the other, but the way everyone talks about it is as if you go from boss to linear hallway, boss, etc., rinse and repeat. Not the case. And there are some lengthy content to have in between these areas. It took me about 30 hours to be basically halfway through the game, and it may not even be halfway. That's how much content I've been going through with the game. Even if you exclude the ideal of me having to backtrack to gain more experience, there's still quite a bit in between in terms of what you can do. And while the bosses do have some variety in their design, which I praise them for, one issue is that you will see some bosses performing an attack that was already performed by a previous boss, basically recycling some attacks throughout the different bosses. The most common one is fighting a boss inside an area that's covered in some type of liquid like water or blood, and they can use that liquid to create some type of liquid, blade attack. If you play the game, you know what I'm talking about, and I've seen that move reused by a few different bosses. But some boss fights do have some really cool cinematic moments that I found to be amazing, and it did help to keep the game a little bit fresh, make it feel a bit fresh when I was a bit upset with the game. Now, after reaching chapter 3 and beyond, surprisingly, the game started to pick up for me. There was some annoying sections, of course, but the game did pick up a little bit. There were some more bugs that I had to deal with, but compared to PC, nothing too crazy or game breaking. And compared to the first two chapters, which had the fewest amount of bugs and issues, I did notice some drops in frame rate and performance, but Despite that, and despite also having pretty much a one button combo system with, of course, the addition of that secondary heavy attack and these other abilities, you are pretty much going to focus on a one button attack. But combat did pick up a bit because you do get more abilities that will help you use in combat with different strategy. You can transform to different enemies. You can use different powers that you find the best fit for you. And as I mentioned previously, you can obtain souls from enemies that you defeat, whether it's a regular enemy type or a mini boss, similar to some Castlevania games like Aria of Sorrow and Dawn of Sorrow. And yes, you can transform into these characters, whether it's just for one attack, or you can sometimes transform into a mini boss per se and fight as that mini boss in battle. And you do have a meter that will drain when you're in that mini boss transformation. Now, I only found one of those mini bosses to play as in combat, and while that boss fight was a bit challenging, I found that being able to transform into the boss had its moments where it was very helpful in combat, and had its moments where it was completely useless, and the only purpose was to survive a bit longer in battle. I have seen tons of reviewers talk about the ability to transform into some animals like an insect such as a cicada or at one point a bat that you could use to avoid areas of enemies. I guess you could say a stealth mechanic, if you will. And they talk about these abilities as using it and then recharging it, waiting a long time for it to recharge. But from what I see so far, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but from what I can tell, transforming into these animals to avoid areas is a fucking lie. Those moments are scripted, and they only happen so few in between. I've saw 2 of these moments so far, and I was unable to transform into these, the cicada or the bat at will. It's not a thing you can do. It's only scripted in certain areas. And that would have been cool to be able to do that as a stealth mechanic to avoid certain fights that you found too challenging. Now for story, yes, things did pick up a bit as well, but only slightly. After chapter 3, which the game still lacks the true depth and scale of something like God of War, that is lacking that beef of content and lore. You do sometimes run into an NPC that can be interesting at times to interact with, but mostly they are pretty cringy. The dialogue is pretty cringy. You do also, however, have the option to do some side quests that could potentially have a character, an NPC, meet up with you later on, and you can then unlock some type of new game store that will provide exclusive items that you can get from those NPCs, such as one of which will allow you to upgrade your gourd to get more uses out of your health refill, and also different abilities that will be used when you drink your health potion, your gourd, something like improved damage, or you can refill your mana bar if your health is already at full and you drink the gourd. There was another character who can create special pills for you that will do different abilities like much more improved damage for your enemies to receive, and also much more damage that you would get less of, reducing your damage a bit higher, that kind of thing. So it was cool that you can do this side content to get these characters unlocked and therefore unlock their services, but you are also able to possibly miss these characters, so do explore the levels when you go through it. And honestly, although I still haven't finished the game and there are these moments that I go through that are completely bullshit, I actually do want to continue and beat the game, not just because I spent $60 on a digital only game and I can't get any money back by a trade-in or a refund because PlayStation already told me no. And I really hate the Souls-like genre and aspect. I hate the trial and error. I hate that there is the whole you got to get good thing. But this game does have some really cool moments and really cool cinematic boss battles. And I want to see how the story ends for myself, not just on YouTube. I want to experience it myself. But I am still very disappointed because me personally, there are more negatives than positives to this game for me. If you find it to be the opposite for you, that's great. This game is crushing it. 10 million sold in the first 3 days or so. It's doing really great in China, really great in the US, probably really great in other countries as well. Great on PS5 and PC. So like I said, it's all my opinions, how I felt about the game overall. So to recap, I feel that they lied about the game not being a Souls-like, or maybe Game Science has no idea what a Souls-like is. But besides that, the story does lack what I feel content and actual detail for the lore, especially for those of us who are unfamiliar with the source material. The game could have done more to brought us into the story and help us understand what's going on. There's no map, there's bugs galore, some enemies that are painfully challenging, and also, of course, the bosses. No variety in weapon. You have no other weapon to unlock except staffs, so that's, no variety in your weapons. Cringy character dialogue, repetitive enemy types and design, but there is the good combat with the variety of how you use your abilities despite the one weapon system and the one button combo system. There is some variety, and you can use your different equipped abilities for that. Amazing sound and visuals, lots of side items and secrets to find. There is a variety in boss design. Bosses do look different from one another. And again, it's still a Souls-like, a genre that I don't think highly of, and I think it's a very toxic topic to talk about the Souls-like and how it's uninviting to people who are not familiar with these challenges. I feel, it's very toxic. People say, get good, don't play it if you suck type of thing. Some people like me want a game that, while it does offer a bit of a challenge, we want it to be also enjoyable and relaxing, especially after long days of work. We don't want to be stressed out from work and then stressed out in our video games. So that's really how I feel. But ultimately, if you're like me and you don't like Souls games, you don't like that punishing, brutal challenge, but you do want to give the game a try, I say wait for a sale. If you are a Souls fan, you're going to love this game completely. You're going to crush this game completely if you're a Souls-like fan. Someone like me, I'm not. I prefer my games more like the God of War, where it's more story, more cinematic. Yeah, the fights are cinematic, but I need more cinematic story to engage in. Other than that, if you have an Xbox, well... But that's ultimately my review of Black Myth Wukong. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about Black Myth Wukong? Are you a fan? Are you angry like I am? Am I just full of crap and you love the game? Which I know I'm in the minority of people who don't like the game. But hey, let me know in the comments what you think. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you guys on the next one. Peace out.